You are not where you are by accident. Every step of your journey, every challenge, every victory, every unexpected turn has been orchestrated by the divine hand of God. He does not make mistakes, and he does not lead his children without purpose. When you look at your life, you may wonder why you are in a particular season, why doors have opened or closed, or why certain relationships have come and gone. But rest assured, God's purpose is always intentional. Think about how God works. He sees the entire picture when we only see a small part. He knows what we need before we even realize it ourselves. That job you didn't get, that opportunity that didn't work out, that move you never planned for, it all fits into his greater plan. Sometimes we assume that because something doesn't go our way, God must not be present. But in reality, God is always present, always working, and always guiding, even when we don't understand. Look at the life of Joseph. As a young man, he had dreams of greatness. He saw visions of himself in a position of power. But what happened next? He was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and later wrongfully imprisoned. From the outside, it seemed like everything in his life was falling apart. But in God's plan, things were falling into place. Every hardship Joseph faced was preparing him for something greater. Had he not been betrayed, he would not have been in Egypt. Had he not been in Egypt, he would not have risen to power. And had he not risen to power, he would not have been in a position to save countless lives during a devastating famine, including the very brothers who betrayed him. What does that tell us? It tells us that even in the most painful moments, God is working. He is not random. He is not careless. His purpose is deliberate, and his plan is always unfolding, even when we cannot see it. There may be times when you feel forgotten. You may wonder why God has placed you in a difficult situation, or why you seem to be waiting longer than expected for an answer. But trust this. If God has brought you here, he has a reason for it. His word reminds us in Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That means even in seasons of uncertainty, God is still working things together for your good. It's important to remember that God's purpose is not just about us, it's about his kingdom. He places us in situations not only for our growth, but so that we can be a light to others. You may be in a certain workplace, not just to earn a living, but because someone there needs to see Christ through you. You may be going through a particular trial, not because God is punishing you, but because he is preparing you to minister to someone who will walk a similar path. God's purpose is bigger than our comfort. It is about fulfilling his divine plan in and through us. When you begin to understand that God's purpose is intentional, it changes how you view your current circumstances. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, God, what are you teaching me? Instead of resisting change, you begin to trust that God is positioning you. Instead of feeling discouraged by delays, you embrace them as part of his perfect timing. The key is trust. Trust that God knows what he is doing. Trust that he sees the road ahead, even when you do not. Trust that he is weaving together every detail of your life into a beautiful masterpiece that will ultimately glorify him. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are exactly where God wants you to be in this moment. And in his perfect timing, he will reveal the next step. Until then, walk in faith, knowing that his purpose for you is always intentional. Growth is never easy. It often comes through challenges, discomfort, and even pain. But one thing is certain, God does not leave his children stagnant. He positions you for growth because he knows that you cannot remain where you are and become who he has called you to be. His desire is for you to mature in faith, develop godly character, and walk in the fullness of your purpose. This kind of growth does not happen in places of ease. It happens in the moments when you are stretched, tested, and refined. Many times we resist growth because it comes in ways we do not expect. We pray for God to use us, to bless us, to lead us, but when He begins the process, we question why things feel difficult. We wonder why certain doors have closed, why relationships have changed, or why we find ourselves in unfamiliar situations. But the truth is, God often uses discomfort to push us forward. He will remove what is no longer serving His purpose in our lives. He will place us in environments that challenge our thinking, strengthen our faith, and prepare us for what lies ahead. Consider how God positioned Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, given every luxury, yet his true calling was not to rule in Egypt, but to lead God's people out of slavery. His growth did not happen in the palace, it happened in the wilderness. For 40 years, Moses was stripped of his old identity, trained in humility, and prepared for the task that awaited him. Had he stayed in Pharaoh's house, he would never have become the deliverer of Israel. His time in the wilderness was necessary because growth requires transformation. The same is true for us. Sometimes God will take us out of places that feel familiar because familiarity can create complacency. If everything in life always stayed the same, we would never have a reason to trust God in new ways. He stretches us by allowing us to go through seasons where we must rely on Him fully. He brings us to moments where our faith is tested, where we are required to step out in obedience even when we cannot see the full picture. One of the greatest examples of how God positions people for growth is found in the story of David. As a young shepherd, David was anointed to be king, yet he did not immediately step into his royal position. Instead, he went back to tending sheep. He faced battles, rejection, and years of waiting before he sat on the throne. Every moment of his journey was preparing him. The battles he fought in secret gave him the strength to face Goliath in public. The challenges he endured as a fugitive taught him how to lead with wisdom and humility. God was shaping him long before he ever wore a crown. When you find yourself in a season where you feel stretched, remember that growth is not punishment, it is preparation. God is refining your character, strengthening your faith, and equipping you for the next assignment. The trials you face today are not meant to break you, they are meant to build you. The lessons you learn now will be the very things that sustain you in the future. Think about the pruning process. In John 15:02, Jesus says, "Every branch that bears fruit, He prunes so that it may bear more fruit." Pruning is not comfortable. It requires cutting away, removing, and shaping, but it is necessary for greater growth. If a tree is never pruned, its branches become overgrown, weak, and unproductive. In the same way, God prunes us not to harm us, but to make us more fruitful. He removes what is unnecessary, He shapes us through His Word, and He positions us to flourish. When you feel like you are being stretched beyond your limits, trust that God knows exactly what He is doing. Growth never happens in the comfort zone. It happens in the wilderness, in the waiting, in the challenges that push you to depend on Him. God will never place you in a situation without equipping you for it. He sees the end from the beginning, and He knows what you need in order to fulfill His purpose. So do not resist the process. Do not fear the unknown. Instead, embrace where God has placed you, knowing that He is using every moment to shape you into the person He has called you to be. The trials of today are the testimonies of tomorrow. The lessons you learn now will be the wisdom you carry into your next season. Trust that wherever He has positioned you, He is preparing you, and in His perfect timing, He will reveal what He has been growing within you all along. Many times we go through life focusing on our personal goals, dreams, and challenges, believing that everything we experience is only about us. But the truth is, God never works in isolation. His plans for your life are not just for your benefit. They are meant to impact the lives of others. Your assignment is always bigger than you. God places people in specific positions seasons, and situations, not just to bless them, but to use them as instruments of His glory. What He does in you is meant to flow through you. The gifts, talents, experiences, and even the struggles you have endured are not just for your personal growth. They are designed to equip you to help someone else. Every victory you experience, every lesson you learn, and every obstacle you overcome is meant to be a testimony that points others to Him. Consider the story of Esther. She was an ordinary Jewish girl who became queen of Persia. At first, she may have thought that her position was simply a blessing for herself, a life of royalty, comfort, and prestige. But when the Jewish people faced the threat of destruction, her true assignment was revealed. She had been placed in that position for such a time as this. Esther 4:14, it was not just about her being queen, it was about saving an entire nation. Had she remained silent or focused only on her own safety, the lives of many would have been lost. But because she understood that her assignment was greater than herself, she stepped forward in courage and fulfilled God's purpose. God calls us to think beyond ourselves in the same way. He places us in workplaces, communities, families, and churches because there are people who need what we carry. Maybe He has allowed you to walk through pain so that you can comfort others going through the same struggle. Maybe He has blessed you with wisdom so that you can guide those who are lost. Maybe He has given you influence so that you can speak truth where others remain silent. Every assignment carries a greater purpose, and when we recognize that, we begin to live with a sense of divine responsibility. Look at Joseph's life. He went from being a favored son to a slave, from a prisoner to the second most powerful man in Egypt. At any point in his journey, he could have questioned why he was going through such hardships, but in the end, he saw the bigger picture. When his brothers came to him in desperation, fearing that he would seek revenge, Joseph responded with words that reveal a deep understanding of God's plan. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Genesis 50:20. His journey was never just about him, it was about preserving a nation. In the same way, what God is doing in your life is connected to something greater than you can see. Your struggles are not wasted, your delays are not meaningless, and your position is not accidental. Every season serves a purpose, and every purpose is tied to the lives of those around you. When you realize that your assignment is bigger than you, it changes the way you handle challenges. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You began asking God, who are you calling me to impact through this? Instead of shrinking back in fear, you step forward in faith, knowing that someone else's breakthrough might be connected to your obedience. Instead of focusing only on personal success, you began to see success as fulfilling the mission God has given you. Jesus Himself showed us the ultimate example of an assignment that was bigger than one person. He did not come to be served, but to serve. His suffering, His sacrifice, and His victory were not just for His own glory, but for the salvation of the world. He endured the cross because He saw beyond the pain. He saw the redemption of humanity. If Christ, the Son of God, understood that His purpose was beyond Himself, how much more should we recognize that our lives are meant to serve His greater plan? God has placed something inside you that the world needs. Whether it is a message, a talent, a calling, or simply an experience that can encourage others, you have been positioned for a purpose greater than yourself. The question is, will you embrace it? Will you step forward, even when it is uncomfortable? Will you allow God to use your life in ways beyond what you imagined? Because at the end of the day, it is not just about you. It is about the lives that will be changed because you said yes to the assignment God has placed before you. Life often takes unexpected turns. We make plans, set goals, and create expectations for how things should unfold. Yet time and time again we find ourselves in situations that don't align with our timeline. The job we wanted doesn't come when we expected. The relationship we prayed for hasn't happened yet. The breakthrough we long for seems delayed. In these moments, it's easy to question God's plan, to wonder if He sees us, if He hears our prayers, or if He is even working at all. But the truth is, God's timing is always perfect, and His direction is always right. He is never early, never late, and never uncertain. He knows exactly what He is doing, even when we do not understand. Waiting on God can be one of the most difficult aspects of faith. We live in a world that values speed, efficiency, and instant results. We want things to happen quickly, and when they don't, we assume something is wrong. But God operates on a different timetable. His ways are higher than ours, and His perspective is eternal. What seems like a delay to us is often divine preparation. When God tells us to wait, He is not withholding His blessings. He is making sure we are ready to receive them. Think about Abraham and Sarah. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, yet years passed with no child. The waiting was so difficult that they tried to take matters into their own hands, leading to consequences that lasted generations. But when the time was right, when Sarah was well past childbearing age, God fulfilled His promise. He did it in a way that made it clear that it was His power at work, not human effort. If God had given them a child on their own timeline, they may have believed they did it themselves. But by waiting for God's timing, they witnessed a miracle that proved His faithfulness. This same principle applies in our lives. Sometimes we are ready in our minds, but God knows we are not yet ready in our hearts. He sees what we cannot. He knows what we do not. When we feel stuck, when we feel like nothing is happening, God is often working behind the scenes, preparing things in ways we cannot see. His timing is not about making us wait just for the sake of waiting. It is about aligning everything perfectly. Joseph understood this well. As a young man, he had dreams of greatness. But before he could step into his calling, he was betrayed, sold into slavery, and thrown into prison. If Joseph had been released from prison too soon, he would not have been in the right place at the right time to interpret Pharaoh's dream and be elevated to second in command over Egypt. The very delays and hardships he endured positioned him for his destiny. What seemed like wasted years were actually years of divine preparation. When we try to force things in our own strength, we often create more frustration and pain. But when we surrender to God's timing, we experience His peace, knowing that He is in control. Proverbs 3:05-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Trusting God means acknowledging that He sees what we do not. It means believing that even when we do not understand His timing, His plan is still good. Sometimes God closes a door not because He is denying us something, but because He is protecting us. That opportunity you wanted but didn't get, maybe God was keeping you from something that would have harmed you. That relationship that ended, maybe God removed it to make room for something better. We only see a small piece of the puzzle, but God sees the whole picture. Every delay, every redirection, every moment of waiting is part of His sovereign design. When you trust His timing, you stop striving and start resting in His faithfulness. You stop panicking over delays and start recognizing them as divine setups. You stop trying to control everything and start walking in peace, knowing that God is in control. The enemy wants you to believe that God has forgotten you, that He is slow to act, that He is not listening, but that is a lie. God is always working, always moving, and always positioning you for what is next. Faith is not just about believing in God when things happen quickly. It is about trusting Him when things seem slow. It is about believing that He is faithful even when we do not see the evidence yet. The waiting season is not wasted. It is where God builds patience, endurance, and unwavering trust. So whatever you are waiting for today, whether it is an answer, a breakthrough, or direction, know this: God has not forgotten you. His timing is perfect. His plans are good. And when the moment is right, He will lead you exactly where you need to be. Until then, trust Him. Walk in faith and know that He is guiding you every step of the way. Everything God does in your life has a purpose. He has brought you here not by accident, but by divine intention. His plan for you is greater than anything you could design for yourself. And though the journey may not always be easy, it is always meaningful. God positions you for growth, stretching, and refining you so that you can become the person He has called you to be. He leads you through seasons of challenge, not to break you, but to build you. And He does not just bless you for your own sake. Your assignment is always bigger than you. Your life is meant to impact others, to be a testimony of His faithfulness, and to bring glory to His name. But in all of this, trust is essential. Trust His timing, even when it feels delayed. Trust His direction, even when the path is unclear. Trust that every step, every trial, and every open or closed door is part of a plan that is greater than you can see. God has placed you exactly where you need to be for this moment. Your life is unfolding according to His divine design. So walk in faith, knowing that He who has begun a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. Stay obedient, stay expectant, and stay anchored in His promises, because He is leading you to something far greater than you can imagine.